Hi, everybody. Wow. Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello. Wow. How are ya? Wow, good stuff. Look at that. We are live. It's Sunday. What is it? The 23rd of April. So, super happy to see you all today. They just released last night, like yesterday morning, my time. They released Spring Boot 3.1. And yeah, that was yesterday. So Saturday, right? I think there was a slight delay. Maybe it was meant to go on Friday. Either way, I couldn't talk about it because I wanted people to have the stable release. So I wanted to talk about one of the biggest features in Spring Boot 3.1. And by the way, for those of you, hello everybody. Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. I love that you're all here. What is the usual YouTuber refrain? Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. So please do on youtube.com/coffee software. Helps me out because I don't know, it's supposed to do something for me. I don't know. Uh, anyway, that's fun. It's nice to have people join the party. So the more people that subscribe, the more people will be routed to via the algorithm to the party, and then more people will join subsequent parties. Hi, good evening. Hello. By the way, I am so happy to see you all. I don't know where y'all coming in from, but I appreciate this is starting a little late. I had stuff to take care of this morning, but I'm just very happy that we're all here today. So yeah, Spring Boot 3.1. Hello, hi. Let me see. Spring Boot 3.1. Let me just share my screen here. Get this party started. All right, good stuff. So we're gonna go to spring.io/blog. Here we are. This is the new release, right? Came out April 22nd. That's yesterday. It's Sunday the 23rd of April where I am. I suspect that actually what time is it? Time in Sydney, Australia.
It's 3:37 in Sydney.
Okay, so hello from Guinea. Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. And also time in Perth, Australia.
In Perth, Australia, it's 1:37.
Yeah. So either way, no matter how you slice it, it's already the 24th for some people. But yesterday, the 22nd, we released on Saturday, we released Spring Boot 3.0, 3.1.0 RC1. Now, I suppose this is obvious, but Spring Boot, there's a new release every 6 months now, right? We just released Spring Boot 3.0 on 24 November 2022, last November, right? Basically 6 months ago. So, what does that mean? It's April. It's the fourth month into the year. So sometime in May, we'll get 3.1.0 GA, right? And there's always nice features in the point releases, the minor releases. But there's a new, not major, but the new minor releases also have features as well. So what I meant was the point releases have new features sometimes, mostly bug fixes, but every now and then you get a feature. The minor releases, the .1, the .2, whatever, those get big features, and those are amazing, right? And one of the big features in this round, besides the upgrades to all the new frameworks and all that stuff, is support for dev time containers. Okay. Yes, exactly, Simon. Yeah, absolutely. See. So very cool. So we've got this really amazing support here, and so what we're going to talk about is that we're going to talk about dev time containers today. That's what we're going to look at. And there's two different implementations. There's a Docker Compose and there's test containers, and so either one works just fine. We're going to go, as always, to start the Spring Dale. Doesn't matter what you choose, but make sure you choose 3.1.0. You can choose Snapshot. Right now, I'm recording this, as I said, on the 23rd of April, 2023. So if you're watching this 2 weeks hence, well, there might be a lot of different things. Things that might have evolved to respond to feedback or whatever. And you might want to get 3.1.0 Snapshot. But for our purposes, yeah, I gave a private demo to my buddy Julien Dubois. I mean, when I say private, everything was there in the source code. If you've been following the Git commits on Spring Boot for the last 4 months, you could see all this coming together. Or if you know where to look in other people's repositories, you can see all this coming together. It's not like we do it in private or whatever, but we didn't announce it because it was still cobwebs and stuff. But I follow this stuff. I mean, that's It's not like I do nothing. Come on. I mean, so anyway, I mean, don't get me wrong. You don't need to follow it. Please don't. It's there's so much dust between the final things that actually land that it can be disorienting. Um, but yeah, I showed my friend Julien Dubois, the gentleman who created a JHipster. Um, I was in DevOps France in Paris, and we went out and I showed him another demo. Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello. So, okay, so let's talk about that. So, we're going to do what, DC comics. Okay, I'm going to call it DC for like development time containers. Beautiful. Oh, okay. We're going to use 3.1.0 RC1. This is what was released yesterday. And again, you could have tried this out 2 days ago. No problem. It was in the snapshots, right? It's just actually they merged the support for this from some of the main branches, including Phil Webb's main branches. They merged that support from Phil Webb's branch into Spring Boot, recently, last few weeks. So we're going to go ahead and let's see. Today we're going to use MongoDB, okay, MongoDB, and we use JDBC, okay, and we're going to use Postgres in particular. So 2 different databases. And what else do we want? Do we care about anything? I guess we can bring in a test container support. That is for the testing, but I wonder if that will also bring in the right module. If it doesn't, we can always just add it manually. Spring Boot test containers. Okay, that's the new module that we care about. So other than that, go ahead and generate CD downloads dc.zip. You see my screen, by the way? Yeah, it's okay. Good. Okay, downloading the world. All right. So, let's talk about the use case here, right? You're building an application. I'm almost 40. I'm 39, and it seems like half or more of the innovation in today's world is not around new things so much as it is making old things easier. And so one big problem that has bedeviled engineering organizations is, how do I get started on your code base as a new engineer on the team, right? How do I get into the place where I can start making meaningful contributions in your project? And there's a number of different approaches here. You've heard about Gitpod and GitHub dev spaces or whatever it's called, dev container, something like that, dev something, or Git, I don't know. They've got a bunch of these things that seek to provide portable, declarative environments for your project. Okay, so that's good. And plus we're working in languages like Java, where if you're using Linux and I'm on Windows and you're using Mac, we can all work on the same code base and compile and test and run on our local machines. Things like Gitpod make it even easier to do it within a consistent environment where all the tools are exactly the same from one environment to another. Code spaces, that's the one I was thinking of, right? Things like code spaces. And so that's all very well and good. You're now basically bringing the magic of Docker to your development environment. And so I think, oh, that's a great leap forward. Another thing is, I want to have code, and I want my code to talk to services, and those services are, you could just download MySQL, you could download Postgres, you could download RabbitMQ, you could download all these different things, but that installation is going to be different from one operating system to another. So you say, well, I could hello, yeah, hi, Edu, good to see you, buddy. Hug, buddy, hugs. So you could download all that stuff and set it up in your local machine as well, and that's pretty tedious, right? And so in the test world, there's a very obvious choice here, which is, I want to have a reproducible version of all my different dependencies. I can do that using something like test containers. And then at development time, an alternative thing that's also been around is something like Docker Compose, where you have both ways let you define containers against which you want to work. But up until now, there's been this sort of arbitrary distinction between development time and test time. And so, but the goal is basically the same. I want a way to stand up this thing and then and have Spring Boot source its connections to those things. Okay, um, dynamically. And uh, okay. So all these things. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Simon, Edu knows he works for test containers. Uh, just, just maybe my two friends can meet each other. So anyway, uh, and not to mention Edu's like one of the most visible, prolific contributors to various Spring projects in the ecosystem. Um, so okay, so we've got this it's repeatable environments, right? And it's super important that we have this technology because frankly, there's just so many more moving parts to your average application, your average system these days. And so whatever you're choosing, it should just be as supported as possible by the framework. So personally, even Docker itself was a big win. I mean, it used to be I had like a environment.sh or something, which just run Docker run A, Docker run B, Docker run C. Now it's sort of like you've got these things that are integrated with your development. Okay, so that's part one. We need portable, reusable environments. Part two is I want Spring Boot to know about this stuff. Okay, and Spring Boot already has preliminary. It's already had for some time now, for years now. At test time, it's had support for via the dynamic property source mechanism for sourcing properties with which to connect to containers being stood up by the amazing test containers library. Okay. Um, yeah, yeah. Edu knows. Yeah. Hello from Azerbaijan. Hi. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Very cool. So, but yeah. So there's all these like really interesting and sort of obvious value. There's all this value associated with having the ability to reproduce your environment. We want Spring Boot to know about it, and we had dynamic property source for test containers in tests. And the way that worked was you had a way to get the properties for the host and the port and the whatever, and then put those properties in the right place so that when the Spring Boot auto configuration came along a little bit later, it would say, okay, give me the RabbitMQ properties object, inject it. I can say RabbitMQ properties.determine host, determine username, determine whatever. Okay. And that works okay, but it's all done in terms of strings. It's all done in terms of, properties, Spring Boot properties. And sometimes that isn't natural. Sometimes there are other ways to connect besides URL, username, and password, for example. And so before we talk about the specific ways that this stuff benefits us here in Spring Boot 3.1, we need to look at what's been done behind the scenes. And again, this is one of the things where you probably won't notice, hopefully, if we've done our jobs right. But one of the big things is that we've broken the connection between auto configuration and properties. Okay. And the way we did that is with this new interface called connection details. Overwhelming, I know. Look at that. It's a lot of moving parts, right? This interface it's a marker, obviously, but everything is now revolving around this. So when you look at, like, for example, the Rabbit auto configuration, okay, let me open the source code here. The Rabbit auto configuration, which one is this? This is 1.0, RabbitMQ. Okay, here we go. So for example, where's it? Well, actually, let's look at the one we're using today, Mongo auto configuration. Okay, there you go. Yep. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Where's my connection details here? Let me just find. There you go. So we have this interface, right? And this interface has numerous implementations. Here's one, for example, for Mongo connection details. So it implements connection details, it extends it, but it adds a whole bunch of stuff regarding connection strings, getting a reference to GridFS, the interface for GridFS, etc. Okay, great. So now we've got Mongo connection details. It's a thing that we can use to get the information required to connect to MongoDB. It's not written in terms of spring.mongodb.whatever, right? Or spring.data.mongodb.whatever. It's written in terms of I need these things to do anything useful with MongoDB. Give them to me, please. We now use this. So you can see find usages. Mongo auto configuration. Here, we're creating a properties MongoDB connection details, and we're injecting the Mongo property. So here, we're creating an implementation of this using Mongo properties. And then this is what gets used to actually create the instance, right? Okay, so find usages. Okay, where's my, here we're saying create the gridfs by using properties MongoDB, blah, 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 get gridfs, get database, okay, etc. So this is an implementation of MongoDB connection details that delegates to Mongo properties. But find usages in all places, okay. Usages, okay, so reactive, here we go. Where's the other one? Yeah, well, let me see. I'm just looking for the example here. Mongo database factory configuration, simple, blah, blah, blah. Dependent configuration. Where's the actual thing? Mongo database, MongoDB factory, gridfs, MongoDB factory. Oh, is the sound not great? Oh dear, let me see, hold on. I was tinkering with this. Studio display audio, crisp. Wait, okay. It's crisp. Okay, so this whole audio thing has caused me no end of pain. What if I did this? Yeti, test, is that any better? Okay, so whatever. Okay, if that works better, let me know. So anyway, yeah, so basically we have this new interface. We have implementations of this connection details. This connection details is what Spring is now using to create its beans, right? This is what creates the actual auto-configured beans for you. This is what we pass in. And so where does this connection details come from? Well, it could come from test containers. It could come from Docker Compose. It could come from property files. It could come from the environment. For example, if you're deploying to Microsoft Azure, I could see in the future maybe they use passwordless connections and they implement it in terms of this interface, right? So we can auto configure, we can provide beans of this type and then inject that, right? And those are what get used to source the connection from MongoDB. We have the Spring Cloud connectors. The Spring Cloud connectors they're the project that existed before Spring Cloud did. We actually took the name from that and expanded it to mean a whole bunch of other things. But originally, it just meant add this jar to your class path, and we'll automatically find the environment variables in the Cloud Foundry or Heroku running environment, and then use that to hydrate a data source or a connection factory or whatever. Well, we could re-implement those. We could rebuild those on top of this abstractions, connection details. So the link is no longer properties that have properties in the environment, whatever, and then those get turned into strings, and then those strings are turned into properties on a properties object, and those properties objects are used in autoconfig. Instead, we have one level of indirection. We have the connection details, and that's what's consumed ultimately to create the relevant things. Okay, good. So part one, that's part one, is we've done that, and what that means is we can source things from a running test container. We can source things from a running Docker Compose instance as well, right? And oh yeah, you've been thinking about adding that to Spring Cloud AWS. That would be great. Yeah, so good stuff. Okay, now that we understand that, basically that indirection, let's actually talk about the feature, right? And so there's I do a lot of very quick demos, okay? And that's just the nature of my particular life. And so I find myself, I mean, if you've been on this channel, there's a bunch of projects that I just created, public static void main. They are very simple so as to educate, but not to take to production. And a lot of them, I stick a Docker Compose file in there. Okay, pretty natural, very natural sort of use case. And the assumption there is, okay, if you've got Docker Compose, then you can clone my code, run Docker Compose up, and then run the code, and you're good to go, right? That's what I want you to be able to do, is to take my code, Docker Compose up, run the code. Simple, not necessarily production, but simple, okay? My Docker Compose, the idea is that my Docker Compose file matches as closely as possible, certainly with respect to the credentials and all that stuff. Well, not the actual credentials, but the setup for the database. It should match what I ultimately put in my containers in production in Kubernetes, right? Okay, so a lot of that, I have that a lot. You know, I have a Docker Compose file. So let's talk about that. Here's Docker Compose. Here's a very simple Docker Compose file. Okay. New file, Docker Compose YAML. Okay. So there we go. There's my very simple, and you've seen me use Postgres a bazillion times, right? It's just my sort of go-to defaulted version, unless I have something else, right? Now I want Spring Boot to see this Docker Compose file, okay? And I'm going to depend on that. I'm going to actually create some schema here, as always, right? Schema.sql, create table, customer, ID, serial, primary key, name, varchar 255, not null, very good. Okay, and what about data.sql, right? Okay, insert into customer name values. And let's get some friends from the chat here, right? Okay. Okay. Come on. Hi, Elias. We have, who else do we have in the chat at the moment? Deba. Okay. And we've got Ali, and we've got Suda, and we've got, I don't know, that's a nice round number, 6, okay? 6 records. So there we go, I've got 6 records. I'm going to start this database up. This is going to be Docker Compose though, so it's not a local embedded database, but I'm going to have Spring Boot started up. It's kind of an amazing blurring of the lines, isn't it? But you have to remember that for our purposes, this is not embedded. So I need to say SQL init equals always, as opposed to embedded, right? I'm not actually using embedded here. I'm using a remote database. Let's go ahead and restart the file. Okay, so problem here is that when I start the application, it complains that it doesn't have a URL, right? I haven't told it spring.data source, password, blah, blah, blah. I want Spring Boot to just automatically do the right thing and use the use the Docker Compose file. So there's a new module here, okay? Org Spring Framework Boot, Spring Boot Docker Compose. Okay, add that. Rebuild the application, and then there you go. You can see that it's doing Docker Compose up, blah blah blah. So it started. It's got a connection. Something is wrong with the. Oh, I've got MongoDB. It's complaining about MongoDB because I don't have MongoDB on the class path, or I don't have a container for that yet. We'll come back. Okay, so put that here. MongoDB, Command-Shift-I. Okay, so let's try this again. It's called DC application .java. Restart this, and you can see it's not as fast to start up anymore. Obviously, it's waiting for a container to spin up, so it takes time, right? And here you've already got some interesting questions to ask, which, like, in this case, I don't have a web server. I'm just restarting the app, and it's doing something. Let's actually do something kind of interesting here, though. Let's say at configuration class JDBC configuration, and I'll just create a bean here. Application JDBC runner, JDBC template, right? Return new JDBC new application runner. Good. Okay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to use template. I'll say template.query Same as always, select all from customer, new row mapper. And obviously I need a record here for my customer, integer ID, string name, okay? And say row mapper, customer, good stuff. All right. Okay, so new customer, int ID, rs.getString name, good. Good. So there's my very, very simple query. And I'm just going to visit each one and print out the results so we can see if stuff is actually happening. I just want to have that, me. I like to see things when the application starts up. Let's run. So it's running, and it's clearly connected to the database, right? It clearly did because it was able to get the data, and I didn't specify the username, the password, the port, etc. And all that, by the way, that information is actually here, but I'm not specifying the username, the password, the port in terms. This is not like a standard. It's not like MongoDB has an environment variable called Postgres_user. That would make no sense. So when you use Docker Compose, there's a Java API, a Java client API that you can use to programmatically talk to the Docker Compose daemon, the whole process behind the scenes, and ask it for a connection. And so that's what we're using behind the scenes here is we're programmatically launching Docker Compose. We're looking at the file and we're saying, okay, what containers are running? And we see one called Postgres. We don't have one thing you want to do is, more typically, you're going to have a particular version of the container, right? You're going to lock this down to a particular version, a particular range, so that no matter what version of Postgres is out there, everybody on the team is using the exact same one. So what is the latest Postgres version? Docker, okay. Okay, so what is the latest? 15.2, huh? So let's just do 15.2, and we'll restart. Let's watch that. So I'm going to upgrade it. I'm going to pin it to a particular version. You can see it's pulling it's actually printing out the poll for all the containers on the command line, which I think is really cool. Hey, Sergey, buddy. Hug. I miss you too. Are you coming to San Francisco? Wait, you're going to be in my city? When do you arrive? I fly to India tomorrow. So hurry up. Come on. Get here today and I'll show you around. Okay, good. So there's the actual thing, right? It's spun up and it's actually talking to the container. It's got the information. I'm able to get this. It's pinned to a particular version. Now we have reproducible environments. Great. Okay, very simple. I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is really powerful. There's also questions about lifecycle. Yeah, you can omit the properties. Yeah, exactly, Kunal. Exactly. You don't have to specify dynamic property source anymore, right? For test containers or for Docker Compose, right? This is now just, Sergey, buddy, send me a phone. Send me a message on my phone on the phone. Send me a text message. Yeah, you don't have to use the dynamic property source. Exactly. How does Spring Boot know to take data from Docker Compose? Wow, that's because it's sorcery, and that's the technical scientific reason is that we're using magic here, and I don't understand. Okay, it's just yeah. Hey, if you're in San Francisco, everybody, and you are here on Tuesday, go see Sergey give a presentation at the San Francisco Java User Group. It's going to be amazing, and I sadly will not be here, even though I live here. That is very awkward. Yeah, but so okay, good. So Spring Boot is getting the information, and it's because of that. It's because of that indirection made possible by that new connection details interface. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. If you have questions, let's say you don't want to wait for the Docker Compose daemon to start and stop the container every single time. Maybe you don't want the Docker Compose support at all. Okay, get rid of it. False. Or maybe you want to change the file that is being used. You could point it to another one, or maybe you've got a particular directory or something like that, right? Desktop common Docker compose.yaml, whatever, right? You can do all that kind of stuff as well. By default, it looks in the current directory for the running source code, the class file, and it goes up a few directories, and it looks for certain files. It looks for compose.yaml, docker-compose.yaml. There's a bunch of files that are used here. So I don't know where the code is for the scan, but it basically looks for a bunch of common names. But if it doesn't work, then yeah. So okay, tonight we're going out, my friend. That's all. That's the facts. Your fate is now intertwined with mine, my friend. As soon as you get here, just call me. Okay, so this is one thing. You can specify the Docker Compose file like that. You can disable Docker Compose support, right? Docker Compose lifecycle enabled equals true. And if you want to like have it start only, like if you want Spring Boot to start Docker Compose if it's not already running, but you don't want it to stop it because it's painful to restart it, then just choose start only, or just choose none. Don't start or stop Docker Compose, or the default, which is to start and stop the container. So it'll start up the container and then stop it on application shutdown. So you can choose which one you want here. Again, this is redundant, so I'm just going to comment it out, but you can kind of see. Okay, the module. Remember, for those of you just joining, we're talking about Spring Boot 3.1 RC1. So this is not yet GA, but the source tree that does this is Spring Boot Docker Compose. It's not on the initializer yet, so you have to add this. You add org Spring Framework Boot for the group ID, and then the artifact is Spring Boot Docker Compose with dashes between. Okay, just add that, and you're good to go. Okay, so this is already pretty useful. I like this a lot. Now the thing is, this is very big hammer E, isn't it? Right? This is like I want to start the application and I want to start the database, and that's fine for as I'm developing, I guess. But most of us have already decided that we want more granular control over the lifecycle of our infrastructure, especially as it concerns tests. Right? Tests. We start a container, clean it up, reset, all that kind of stuff. And so a very natural choice in this space, of course, is test containers, right? So it's a very natural choice there. I think people are already using it, and so we want to support that as well in the same way that we have Docker Compose support. And by the way, we've already got test container support in Spring Boot. It's been there for years, but only for testing. Okay, so what we wanted to do is to make it an option for people to use test containers, because why wouldn't you, during development? And to that end, we've created a new module here. Let's see. So I'm going to say Spring Boot test containers. Okay. Reload this. Okay. So we've looked at we're using we're using Docker Compose and we're using JDBC. I'm talking to Postgres right now. Okay. Now let's talk about MongoDB, and we use MongoDB, and we're going to use test containers. So what I want to do is I want to have test container support instead of Docker Compose support. I want to source the definition of my container, not from Docker Compose, but from a running test container. Okay. And in order to do that, I need to create a main method, because again, I want to develop on my code. I want to work on my code just like I did with Docker Compose, but I also want to have test containers providing the images for my properties. I want to source the information from test containers itself. So, and I want to develop it. It's not just about testing now, right? So I'm going to create a new main class, and my first main class was DC application. So I'm going to call this test DC application. Okay, test DC application. In it, I'll create another main class in the test folder, right? And the reason I need this is because my test container support is scoped to my tests, okay? So we're going to say Spring application from, and this is, it's a little convoluted, but it's not actually that bad. What you're doing is you're going to say DC application dot main strings, okay? And then of course this boils down to a nice lambda. So we'll just do that right here. So from reference, that's much nicer, right? Very, very nice. So all we're doing is we're saying create a Spring Boot application in my test context, in my test scope, using dependencies that are available at test, and do it from this main application. Okay, very, very simple. So now I want to create what do I want to do? I want to create an application that has a container. Okay, so I'll create a configuration here. Class Mongo, test configuration, right? I'm going to use test configuration here. not first. Okay. So Mongo test configuration. And test configuration, for those of you who don't know, it's just a at configuration, but it tells it it's test time, right? It's good for Spring Boot's support there. And here, I'm going to create a test container image. Okay, so what am I using? MongoDB, Mongo container, MongoDB container. Return new Mongo container, and you have to specify a version. And you can do this two different ways. You can say Docker image name.parse blah, or you can do this. Now, some of you might be confused by this as well. If you've been using this long enough, you might remember that it was possible to just basically create a container without specifying the version. This is now required. You have to specify the version, which I think, or you have to specify your own tag, which makes perfect sense. This is exactly what you should do. So what is the MongoDB version to use these days, right? MongoDB test container. Yeah, I've already figured this out. Why am I stressing? Let's just copy and paste some code. Here we go. Okay, so we want this one. I'll just use this. It's fine. Okay. Get that in there. There we go. And we also want to make sure that our support figures out that this is a test container and pulls it in. So we're going to use @service container. Okay. So there's this. Now, do I need anything else? No, that should be it. Let's go ahead and run it. We'll create a bean here. Application runner, Mongo runner. And again, it's not like I can't have production code. Obviously, I can. So let's go over here and I'll create another type still. We're going to create another type here called, let's say, cat. I don't know. Okay, UUID, string name. Okay. Cat ID. Did I bring in Spring Data MongoDB, or did I just bring in MongoDB? Oh, yeah, I commented out. That's right. So here we go. Get that. Bring it in. And this annotation here. Build.gradle. Command-Shift-I. Good. Okay, so there's my cat. Right. Yeah. That's exactly the logic. I mean, this is it's obvious, right? If you think about it, it's a brilliant, really good change. So I'm a huge fan, and that's a huge reason why I love this support in Spring Boot. By the way, is that there's no guessing. We're not guessing what version for either Docker Compose or for test containers that you want. And imagine if we tried to do that. Imagine if we were releasing Spring Boot 3.1 today and it's tested against version X, Y, and Z of your favorite databases. Then tomorrow, or next year or whatever, Spring Boot 3.2 come, or I guess later this year, 3.2, and then 3.3. Do we upgrade the container version now suddenly? Because our client code is now supporting the new stuff? I mean, what does that mean for your test, dev rinse repeat lifecycle? It's just really fragile. So you have the ability now to pin down exactly what version and how it's configured and all that in the normal way. Okay. So here's our MongoDB and Mongo template. Okay. So I'm using MongoDB. I'm going to say template dot save new cat null Felix. Okay. Save. I can say template dot find all cat dot class dot for each. So, and I guess I don't need this. Good. But let's now run this, but we're not going to run it from the main method in the main code. We're going to run it from the main method in the test code, which is the same thing, basically. It's exactly the same thing. Okay. Look at that. There's test containers starting up. Ryuk, MongoDB. So cool. Oh, that's so good. So good. So there's our customer data from the JDBC stuff. And here's our test container support working. So you can do the tests, obviously. I mean, I'm not going to show you all the add test container support and dynamic property source. That's old. It's still there. It still works just fine. It's perfect for that, right? Test containers is a very natural thing in your test. What we've done here, though, is we made it so that you can have a running public static void main app against which you're developing and, manually sort of clicking around and trying things out using test containers as well. And again, we're not specifying any dynamic property sources here. We're not doing anything, to tell Spring Boot where to get that information. It just knows. It knows how to get that information by talking to the right Java API behind the scenes, okay? So if you want in production code, now, of course, this is a good point too. This is another good point, which is, how do I get this to production? Like, I don't want Docker Compose or test containers, although I love them both. I don't want them running in my production code because I've already got a real Postgres instance somewhere. I'm not sure if it's already been done. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens. But my understanding is that you can just build the jar, and that code that starts up either test containers or Docker Compose won't be there. Let's try it. This part I actually haven't tried out yet. The idea is that it won't be there eventually. So let's see here. CD. So build, sorry, Gradle, build. I guess boot jar, build boot jar, whatever. Let me see, tasks. This is just build. Let's just try that, build. And I haven't, and by the way, before you ask, I also haven't tried this with a GraalVM native image. Remember, friends, this is early days yet. We still have a good, several weeks or a month or whatever before this is out there. So I suspect a lot of this is already working, but I just don't know. So let's see, build boot image. Does build call, does it depend on build boot image, I wonder? CD build libs. Okay, Java minus jar. Jar. Okay, so that clearly is a work in progress. It's doing all the wrong things there. So we'll figure that out. But yeah, it's early days. This is cool stuff. I hope you will try this stuff out. There's a lot more beyond what we've just covered here, but basically the idea is that we've introduced this new connection details interface that provides the indirection between where Spring sources its connection information and the thing that provides that connection information. That means that now there's room for something like Docker Compose or test containers, the perennial favorite test containers, to then stand that up for us, which we automatically orchestrate here, bowing, of course, to your configuration, your inputs for the service connections for test containers or for the Docker Compose file for Docker Compose, and then that all just comes together nicely. So what do you think, friends? Cool, very cool, super cool. I like it. Guess that's it. I just wanted to show you that, like, it's Sunday. This is the kind of stuff I want to show on a Sunday. Like, this is stuff that makes me happy. So, all right, have a great one, everybody. I'm gonna go, wait for Sergey to get here. Are you coming from New York? Like, because if you're coming from New York, that's like a 5-hour flight. So I guess I'll get lunch without you. But okay, all right, everybody. Have a great day.